Well, tonight we're diving beneath the ice with Brad Olsen, award-winning author, world traveler, and researcher known for exploring hidden histories, UFOs, ancient civilizations, and government secrets. His latest book, Secrets of the Antarctica, The Untold History of the Ice Continent, investigates one of the world's most mysterious regions, from Nazi expeditions in Base 211 to Admiral Byrd's Operation Highjump, underground civilizations, ancient maps, and reports of UFO activity beneath the ice. We'll also discuss Brad's own journey to the Antarctica and why this frozen continent continues to spark theories about lost knowledge, advanced technology, and hidden truths waiting to be uncovered. I'm Tony Sweet with Truth Be Told. Welcome back to the Truth Be Told studios, the one and only Brad Olsen. Well, I don't know. It looks like he's up in space. Maybe he's on a SpaceX ship over there. How you doing, Brad?
Hey, Tony, I'm doing great. Yeah, this is my Antarctica satellite shot behind me, and you're down in Antarctica behind you on a U-boat.
I know if you can see. I don't know if people can see. There's the little submarine underneath. You know, I'm excited because not only that we've known each other a long time, and you've been on my shows many times, but it's been a while. And so, especially since the new book has released, and Secrets of the Antarctica, the Untold History of the Ice Continent, and I love it. So, and you've been there. I remember that's when I interviewed you, I think right before you went down to the Antarctica. So
it has been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. But before we all just dive into what we're going to be interviewing about, you're going to be coming to Contact in the Desert in a week, and I'll get to see you there. Are you going to be talking about similar to what we're talking about today?
Yeah, I have a brand new Antarctica talk for conferences that I just gave to a German audience about the German U-boats penetrating deep under the ice in Antarctica and what Operation Highjump was all about, and so many other things, which of course are the subject of my new book, Secrets of Antarctica.
Yeah. Now, how did the Germans take it?
Well, I was a little bit concerned going in.
Right.
That they may not take it very well, but actually the reverse was true, and they were very happy to hear it. In fact, afterwards, some people came up and said, no German would be able to give that talk, Brad. We're not allowed to talk about these subjects, so leave it to an American to come to Germany to tell us about our history.
That's hilarious. Okay. Wow. You're like, you're welcome. Well, you know, I'm a big history buff, and so World War II is something that I've always been interested in. But that's one thing they didn't really, if you see a lot of documentaries, they don't talk about the interest of Hitler and his regime into the Antarctica. And what convinced you that Antarctica was more than just a frozen continent and actually kind of tied to this hidden history? When did you start getting the interest of it?
Sure. Well, yeah, as you mentioned, I went down there 7.5 years ago, and I already had a big interest in all things weird and paranormal and wonderful about Antarctica. and it just kept coming up that the Germans also had that same interest, and they took this piece of land in what is now known as Queen Maud Land, and called it New Schwabenland, named after the ship they sailed down there, called the Schwabenland. And they set up not one, but 3 bases there that I've been able to identify in this area.
Here, let me go on a single shot so they can see it a little bit better.
Yeah, I guess so.
I was going to say, yeah, there you go.
New Schwabenland. And so then they first went down there and set up a military base called Point 211, which is just the designation on the German map there. You can see it was in a grid formation.
Right.
And then they also went under the ice and set up the New Berlin Science City that Admiral Byrd was tasked to dislodge the Germans from Antarctica and even retrieve two UFOs, two of the Honeyboo craft.
Really? Wow.
That they knew had been down there. I would assume many more than just two.
Right.
But the Brits had cracked the Enigma code, and they were spying on the Germans when they were shipping all this stuff down there. So they knew that they had quite a bit of material and personnel and some of these flying discs. So, Tony, just when I was in Germany, I put it into my presentation that the big UFO dump about 2 weeks ago, or from the Department of War, one of those documents from the FBI was of a German who was reporting on their testing UFOs in the Black Forest region in 1943, vehicles that could go 1,500 miles an hour.
Oh my God.
Reach an elevation of 40,000 feet. So we're talking about spaceships in Germany in the form of these Honeyboo UFO craft that we've been vindicated because it's now in these files that have been released in the first of many UFO dumps. And of course, many of those scientists after World War II came over here in Project Paperclip and helped start up NASA and work in a bunch of other secret aviation aeronautical programs as well.
Okay. One thing that I found interesting in your book, your discussion of the German U-boats traveling beneath the Antarctica, the ice, and how was it possible that technologically in the 1940s was this available, and what documents support those claims?
Yeah, and this was when I was researching this book a year ago, putting it all together. A very, very interesting gentleman came into my life who had a lot of these documents that were just released a few years ago by a Russian journalist named Nikolai Subotin. And he had acquired them, like many of the UFO crash videos or alien autopsy videos. If you went to Moscow in the mid 1990s with a suitcase full of money right after the Soviet Union collapsed, you could have people go into the KGB office and get you anything you want. A lot of those videos are now surfacing on the internet, but a lot of the Antarctica material that was captured by the Soviet Union at the very end of World War II, because they were the first to get to Berlin. So they got the lion's share of documents to take out of there. And so this guy, Nikolai Subotin, he's been doing some videos now, and we've been able to get some of the documents of the U-boat directional maps under the ice, which even name Agartha by name on these maps, and also on the specific directions for the U-boat captains to a place called Agartha. In no uncertain terms, this is where they were going. And we retraced the steps with this research assistant named Frank DeComer, and he was able to put that location where these U-boats were going to within 100 miles of the South Pole. So this is what he mapped it out on Google Earth, and there it is on the bottom. And he even names it Agartha. So they had some knowledge and some directional maps about this inner Earth realm before World War II started, from expeditions that went to Tibet. So there was a famous explorer named Ernst Schaefer, and it was what the movie 7 Years in Tibet was modeled after. Brad Pitt played that guy. Although they didn't get into any of this stuff, nor their
That's too bad. Part 2.
To get into inner Earth. Yeah, that would be realistic, but maybe too much information.
Yeah.
But what is known is that he came back in 1938 with a treasure trove of documents, maps, other artifacts, And the Nazi Party could waste no time putting together their first expedition to Antarctica and then claiming this land in New Schwabenland based on what Ernst Schaefer brought back from Tibet. So it's assumed that he was able to make contact with some inner Earth civilization, and that's what the Germans were so utterly fascinated with. In fact, the Ahnenerbe, which was tasked with all these missions, and they were run by the SS. The name Ahnenerbe was the search for our ancestral ancestors. So they were looking for anything they could, and of course, trying to find the origin of the Aryan race of people. And what they found was this connection to Agartha. When Admiral Byrd, he was the first pilot to fly over the South Pole in 1929. He went back a second time to the South Pole in 1946 at the beginning of Operation Highjump. And in his diary, he describes going into this inner realm with his plane through a giant hole in the ice near the South Pole. And he went to a place called the Domain of the Ariani. Ariani, Aryan, very similar sounding words. So I think they succeeded in meeting their ancient ancestors in these inner Earth environments.
Wow. I know there's a lot of people that's probably listening in or maybe not really had any interest in this before, but this is a lot of information, and we can't just say there's a few people like making this stuff up. This was a whole governments. This is governments. This is, our leaders of the world then and now that are still interested in the Antarctica. So you can't deny why they're so interested in a big land of just ice, and restricted areas that you're like, it doesn't make sense. So I think a lot of these, like you said, these information dumps are really starting to make people think of the conspiracy theorists as, as we are saying, wait a minute, these are actually starting to be revealed to the masses. So, but it's people like you that, actually not only go down there, but they do the research to bring it to the world. Can you talk about Base 211, and why is it so legendary, this topic?
Well, it's legendary because it was the first location that the Germans were going to set up a base.
And what did they pre-pick this spot to put the base up, or do you know?
Well, I think they were told random? Where to look.
Oh, okay.
Because they found this area. It's now called the Schumacher Ponds area, and it's indicated on that map I just showed.
Right.
And they were going down there to open up their first base, and they're flying over all of this area of Queen Maud Land, which they renamed New Schwabenland, and they found what's called an Arctic oasis. It's an area that never freezes in ice because it is warmed by the geothermal activity.
Oh, yeah.
And this is what it looks like, and this is how it's indicated on the
map. Put it more in front of your face. There you go.
Put it right in front of my face.
There you go.
That's what it looks like on Google Earth, and this is the German version of it. Oh, shoot.
There you go.
And you can see right where my fingers are. It says Schumacher Seengruppe, the group of lakes that never freeze. And so that's where they landed the seaplane, and for a week, an expedition party went out to find the location of Base 211, also called Point 211. And in all aspects, they succeeded. They came back. Schumacher stayed behind with the pond. He was doing water tests and found that the deeper he tested the water, the warmer it got. So they're clearly geothermically active. And he also discovered that they're very, very deep. And some of these, there are two bases that are still there today, and they have these long piers on them, which some have said are submarine docks, and submarines can come and go from this location. So they went down there, they founded Base 211, and then during World War II, keep in mind that the Brits had cracked the Enigma code breaker, so they could listen in on the transmissions from the U-boats back to Berlin and knew that they were bringing down a huge amount of materiel and personnel all through the war years, including some of their Honeyboo craft. And so the mission for Admiral Byrd in Operation Highjump was, one, to dislodge the Germans, to try to bomb them out of there, but they couldn't, and also to recover two UFO Honeyboo craft. And there's Admiral Byrd, one of the most decorated and celebrated military men in history. He would come back from some of his other Antarctica trips, and they would give him a ticker tape parade in New York City.
Wow.
Well-loved man. And then he was commissioned to lead Operation Highjump in 1946 and 1947, which was cut short 2 months into the 6 to 8 month expedition.
Wonder why that happened. What's your theory?
They were confronted with discs that came up out of the ice and holes in the ice and out of the ocean depths. And this too was part of that Soviet Union data dump, because there was a researcher named Terzinsky, and he spoke about this quite a bit. He's still alive. He lives in America now, but he won't talk about it anymore. We're not sure if he's been silenced or why he stopped talking, but he also talked about the giant hole in the ice, that it was several miles across. And I quote him at the beginning of the chapter called Operation Highjump, where he says, the city of New Berlin was developed into the inner earth and part of the Germans' South Polar colony.
Wow.
Interesting that he says South Pole and not New Schwabenland.
Right.
And they were admitted by the inner earthlings to build a city there. So they were given permission. They built most of their buildings that architect Albert Speer was planning to build in Berlin. Remember, they had designs for Berlin after the war. And then New Berlin was the name they gave to the city under the ice that Captain Mark Richards, Carrie Cassidy's whistleblower, called a science city, where they were continuing research on the Honeyboo and zero-point energy and all kinds of things, even cloning laboratories.
Wow.
Kind of some weird stuff, too. Kaczynski also said that after the U.S. was defeated in Operation Highjump, which was taking place in late 1946 simultaneously to the Russians trying to put their own submarines and retrace the steps of the Germans. But when they got to this choke point on the continental level, in the reports that went all the way up to Stalin himself, that they were met by submersibles that turned them back.
Wow.
And so the Russians saw the Americans saw the Russians, both doing operations right after World War II down in Antarctica, and both were not successful in dislodging the Germans from there. So then they had to reach a truce. And this is what the flyover in Washington, D.C., remember in 1952, the very infamous flyover of Washington, D.C., the most sensitive airspace in the world. And I think Admiral Byrd would have known what that was all about, because he had the famous saying that we would be confronted with an enemy that flies from the polar region that can go pole to pole at incredible speeds. And then so you have this UFO flyover in 1952 when Truman is still the president. He's just about to leave office. Eisenhower's already been elected. And so they both know exactly what's going on, that it's these Antarctica Germans that they cannot shoot down, they can't defeat. So they had to reach an uneasy truce. And then Terzinsky even says that later they established shoulder to shoulder cooperation of the Russians and the Americans quietly of the Illuminati government. So they had to reach some kind of a truce agreement. And then this is what precipitated the Antarctica Treaty, which created these vast no-fly zones, no-go zones area all across Antarctica.
Do you feel if the war would have went longer and the Germans had more opportunity to get this technology under their wing and in their hands, do you feel the war would have been different?
And we'd all be speaking German, even here in America.
Yeah.
Actually, I do. It's funny you bring that up because at my talk in Germany last week, some people were coming up to me afterwards and said, "How did Germany lose the war?" Well, it wasn't supposed to start until 1947, in which case they would have had all the wonder weapons online and it would have been a cakewalk.
Yeah.
They could have easily taken everyone, including America. But they felt that the Soviets were going to attack first. So after, and they didn't think that France and England and everybody would get involved in the war in 1939 when they invaded Poland, but they did. And then after Pearl Harbor, Germany declared war on the U.S. It was the only country they declared war on. Every other country they just assimilated into their empire, the Third Reich. But once America got in, then things started to change. And by 1943, after Operation Barbarossa, when they invaded the Soviet Union, things started going wrong after they lost the whole Sixth Army in Stalingrad. And then they were on the retreat. So at that point, they already knew we got to start getting our stuff out of here.
Yeah.
And including many metric tons of gold, which have never been recovered.
Oh, really?
This was the financing to start the Fourth Reich, which began at the end of World War II. And you could probably make the argument that the headquarters of the Fourth Reich was Antarctica.
That is pretty fascinating. Now, you went down there, which we've talked about that before, but I'm curious, did you personally see any signs and the locals, you know, the people that are taking you on the ships and even some of the local people, did you bring it up? Because I'm sure people have brought this up before. And are they more secretive? Are they more open? I mean, what is their theories on all this talk of the UFOs and secret or ancient civilization underneath, and with the Hitler and Nazis? What's the locals talk about?
Well, so the region I went to is up there on the Palmer Peninsula.
Right.
And then you can see the southern tip of South America there too. That's where we took the boat over the Drake Passage. And even before the trip started, I started talking to sea captains at a New Year's Eve party we were invited to. And I asked them if they knew anything about the Nazis there. And they said, this one guy was very talkative. And he said he's been down there many times. And he's looking for one of these 2-meter long darts that they dropped that would open up a flag that they used to claim the land. He said, if you find one of those, they're worth $100,000. You could resell them. But none of them really knew about the German colonies or what was going on there, just because it's hidden out of sight and under the ice. But the location of the Antarctica that I visited is probably about 2,000 miles away from New Schwabenland, so it's pretty far away, and we didn't see any traces of that. But what I did see were the spy stations of the British who had cracked the Enigma code and were picking up the U-boat transmissions between Berlin and the U-boats. And one of the last transmissions from Berlin was Hermann Göring talking to a U-boat off of Terra del Fuego on their way down to Antarctica. So, yeah, I mean, they knew that they were down there. They knew they were doing that. So the Brits actually tried to put their own force together to dislodge the Germans. And this was an article in Nexus magazine where they said that they were talking with their compatriots at some of these bases, and they said that they were confronted with the polar men, who are like these giant men that were hairy and could withstand the cold. And it sounds like a product of some genetic engineering, because the British commandos who had tried to penetrate into this inner ice realm, they were chased down by the polar men, and they were never seen or heard from again.
Oh gosh, it's almost like a intertwined Bigfoot and
Yeah.
Sasquatch and Yeti and all that. You've talked about the ancient civilization underneath and how it's is warm. We understand that, the geothermal, but with our ancient ancestors, what do we kind of know what this species is? Is it, I know it doesn't seem like they're the grays, or maybe they are, or the humanoids, or what, reptilians, or are there a whole mix of different types of extraterrestrials down there?
What'd you see in this data dump 2 weeks ago? Fox News picked up on it and said that, well, we now are learning that there are 4 species of aliens that are interacting with the Earthlings. And they go on to list the gray aliens that you typically see in movies. Waters, he was the Fox reporter talking about it, said there are the insectoids, there are the reptilians, and there are the tall Nordics, the 7 foot tall, blonde hair, blue eyed Nordic ETs. And I think those were the ones that the Germans were very interested in joining with, and that was their Aryan ancestors, and were probably the inhabitants of Agartha.
Wow. Yeah, and what do you think of the 4, but we know there's many, that is the ancestors underneath the ice? What is your thoughts?
I would say it's probably the tall, not the tall whites. They're more of big-eyed gray alien types,
Right.
but the tall Nordics. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
they're basically the ones who could probably pass for us, but they're highly telepathic. So, for example, when Byrd went down there, written in his diary, he goes down there and he was called to have a meeting with the master, as he called him in the book. And when he goes to meet the master, he finds that the master is highly telepathic, because Byrd asked him, why did you want me to come here? Why did you summon me? And he said, well, you're very well known on the surface world. And Byrd thinks to himself, surface world, where am I? And the master smiles and he says, well, you're in the domain of the Ariani in the inner earth realms. And so answered his question that he thought telepathically. And Byrd said that he kind of had this aura about him, that he's this very old but very wise master that was very concerned about the U.S. having nuclear bombs. And this was shortly after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And the warning he gave him was to take back to the Pentagon and say, you're like children in a forest with a pack of matches when it's really dry and windy. We don't want you blowing off these nuclear bombs. We don't even want you using nuclear for power energy.
Well, we didn't listen.
Deaf ears, of course, but
yeah, apparently we're rebels because we didn't
about.
listen.
Oh yeah.
Well, I'm curious though, if that's the case, then would the master even turn down any type of affiliation or even type of partnership with, the Nazis? Because they didn't have a good intention of, and not worrying about killing people. So what is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that is the big confusing point here because the Soviets were turned away
Hmm.
with their submarines. The Americans were attacked, but the Germans were welcomed in and
That's
allowed to
crazy.
build their new Berlin base, presumably near the domain of the Ariani. So why? I don't know. Did they see something in them that perhaps the benevolent side, the scientific side, and
Wow.
allowed them to join? So what was interesting too is that one of those submarines that came up in Argentina months after the end of World War II, the U-530 and the U-977, both had empty cargo holds. So they had just delivered a whole bunch of supplies. And under interrogation, the captains admitted that they were part of the Führer's convoy of these U-boats at the very end of the war that brought down personnel and supplies. But on board were many men who had sustained injuries at the end of World War II, but they were not allowed in. So I was doing an interview with Tyler Kaiwala of Journey to Truth 2 weeks ago, and he had another book that I hadn't read about before, which had photos of the New Berlin base. And he said that these people of Agartha, you could only enter if you were of pure of heart. And so we thought maybe these guys who had these injuries were not pure of heart, that they still had a lot of animosity from the war and were turned away. So perhaps they only accepted the good Germans, and
Right.
there were good Germans, of course.
Oh, of course. I think under any regime, there's good people. Just
Yeah,
unfortunately, they have to follow rules. So, um,
exactly.
one thing I've heard about this years ago, and maybe it was maybe a Leonard Nimoy in Search of or something like that. I don't remember where I've seen this, but you're going to know this. But you mentioned ancient maps showing the Antarctica before it was officially discovered, which is always fascinating. But how do you explain maps that appear to depict it like this ice-free continent centuries ago?
Yeah, that's another big mystery and secrets of Antarctica, which I have a whole chapter called "Map of the Ancient Sea Kings," where I get into a half a dozen of these maps that showed Antarctica, not years or decades, but centuries before it was discovered. Most especially the Piri Reis map, which
Yeah,
I think a
yeah,
lot of
Perry.
people are
Yeah,
familiar with,
that's what I was
that
trying to
showed
think of
the
his name.
Antarctica coastline. Yeah, and not only that, the coastline, but uh, a series of islands that are now underneath the Fitchner ice shelf, but with radar scanning have determined that there really are islands under there. So it would appear that this Piri Reis map was charted and mapped at a time when Antarctica was free of ice. So that must have been thousands of years ago.
That is, I remember seeing that, and it was so fascinating. And now with the Antarctica ice starting to melt, I'm curious to see what is discovered, and also, do you feel security is going to be even more of not allowing people to go down there if with some of this ice melting and things are being more revealed? What is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is the big question whether we're going to start to hear about some of these massive UFO crafts that are under the ice.
Hmm.
There's supposed to be three of them. I've been able to pinpoint two of them, and one of them happens to be in the New Schwabenland area called the Conan Base. And I provide GPS coordinates for people to take a look at it themselves because what's under the ice there, and it's a seasonal base still run by Germany. In the year 2013, they were doing an excavation of this thing, and I've got the pictures of it in the book. There's the Conan base, and then this is the massive machine-like structure that they were excavating
Mm,
that year. Now
yeah.
it looks quite different. Now they covered it with like a canvas or something. It looks like circus pole tents poking up through the surface, and it's no longer visible in that form. But when they were excavating it in 2013, there was a runway and snowmobile tracks. And Emery Smith, who is the host of Cosmic Disclosure on Gaia TV, he introduced me at a conference in Sedona a couple weeks ago. And up on the screen was that slide. And he goes, "Oh, that's the door. That's the location that when they were excavating it, they found a way to get in." And so we think this might be what the elite call the Illuminati Disneyland, that they're able to go down there and go in there and check this thing out. One of the three motherships that our intelligence assets called the Nina Pinta and Santa Maria was their nickname for three massive craft under the ice.
Do you feel the master and the other ancients are still there? Do you feel they were there temporarily? And I'm surprised that I'm not surprised because I've heard many leaders go down there often. Like you said, the Illuminati probably has a heyday down there. But do you feel that they're still down there, and why the Antarctica? Why?
Well, it's the best place to hide.
I guess true.
Planet Earth.
I guess
so.
True.
If you wanted to get off the radar, or especially if you're under the ice, you can't be seen by satellite or drones or anything. So, apart from the deepest depths of the ocean, Antarctica is the best hideout, and it's still the least known region of the world too. It's like the deepest depths of the ocean. It's still the unexplored territory on planet Earth. So it's a perfect hideout place. The way to get down there and to explore around is very difficult. So it makes it almost the perfect fortress.
Yeah, that's true.
To stay hidden from the world, yeah.
Do you feel like this could be the Atlantis that many have talked about over the years, how it disappeared, and maybe that's when the map was made, maybe Atlantis was still above ground. What is your thoughts on this could be the Atlantis that we've heard in the many stories?
Well, that's what Dr. Michael Salla was telling me and sharing me GPS coordinates, and several I put in the book, of the possibility that Atlantis was part of Western Antarctica, which is a separate continental landmass that conjoined during the last pole shift. And it traveled down the mid-Atlantic ridge to its present location during this last pole shift event. Whereas Eastern Antarctica, that big pie-shaped landmass, it's right behind my head, that's 3 billion years old. That was once part of Pangaea or Gondwanaland, and it has in its fossil record animals that once conjoined when it was part of Pangaea, that there are animals, land animals, that could not have swam that distance, that are found in the fossil record in Australia, in India, and also Africa. So it's a very ancient landmass, and that would suggest that, well, Atlantis being on the newer Western Antarctica, which is only 700 million years old, I say only because in geological terms that's pretty new, that's where these locations that Michael Salla shared with me. And I tell you, when you look at them on GPS, some of them they let you look at. There are other places where Google Earth will not let you look at. You can even clearly see the masking where they just put down a white triangle, say, nope, no one's looking here. Wow. But then other ones where you can see a grid-like pattern, which Mother Nature does not create perfect right angles, and a consistent geometric grid-like pattern. And also, Tony, what they're doing now is scanning the all underneath the ice and also finding grid-like patterns. And some of this is coming out in the mainstream media. Just like, remember a couple months ago or last year when they were doing it at Giza Plateau in Egypt,
Oh yeah.
finding a whole city underneath there. Well, they're doing that in Antarctica and finding quite a bit of evidence for an advanced ancient civilization there too.
I know it's. I think Antarctica and even Egypt. I mean, the world itself, but there's, it is kind of like the universe. We don't know kind of what's under there yet. It's things are always being discovered, and that's what excites you. It's what excites me and many people that gets excited about new discoveries. And I think Antarctica, we're going to find out so many things about who we were and who we are, just through the research that keeps coming out of these locations. And during the research that you've done, did you ever discover or uncover anything that genuinely maybe unsettled you, or made you change, or made you question mainstream historical narratives?
That when I was down there, I was going around to all the research stations and, like I said, talking to other captains of boats that were making trips down there and asking them the same question. Do you know anything about these three motherships under the ice? Do you know anything about antediluvian civilization, including the pyramids that are poking up through the ice, or any paranormal or UFO related sightings? And routinely, I got no as an answer. But when I was on a base run by the Argentinians, they had just had a sighting at another one of their bases called Belgrano 2, which is not too far away from the New Schwabenland German claim. And they had seen some UFOs and light orbs flying over the base. Everybody ran out and everybody saw it. And then they were talking about it with some of their colleagues on the other bases. And at first, they didn't want to tell us. My rudimentary Spanish skills, like, no, it's forbidden. You can't tell them. But this person who was saying that to the other guy, she left. And I was like, come on, man, you got to tell us what you see. And then he spilled the beans and told us they had the UFO sighting. So there are paranormal sightings, and that's not the only place that I heard that. Also on Deception Island is a very deep volcanic caldera, and ships have been seen coming and going out of that volcano. And then we also found out about the no-fly zones, that there are areas and no-go zones where you can't even cross-country ski over that.
Oh, wow.
I remember reading in the Nexus magazine about 20 years ago about two Olympic athletes from Australia that wanted to cross-country ski across. And some people have done that, but these two women seem to have veered off course, and they were heading towards something sensitive. And our Navy SEALs came down and just landed and said, "Trip's over, ladies. Get on." They didn't want to, but they were forced to abandon their trip.
I mean, good for them to even try to compete that task. I don't know if I could. I don't know if I could have done it, but I think one day I would love to go down and see as much as I can. Before we get out of here, also with Hitler and the Nazis were trying to find this anti-gravity technology. Was there any location that you've heard of in the Antarctica that has any type of different gravity pull, or that's maybe a little off from what the rest of the world experiences?
Well, that was one of the big findings from this season. And so a lot of the researchers who work in Antarctica, they only go from November until early March, because that's really the only time you can work on the surface. And one of the big findings this year was these gravity holes, as they were called, which were just sucking gravity into them, almost like a black hole, but on Earth. But way deep down underneath the polar plateau, they were detecting these gravity holes. And that's really interesting, because not only is there that massive hole in the ice near the South Pole, but also that in previous years, they detected cosmic rays coming out of Antarctica at a 30-degree angle, too. And they also detected radio waves,
Wow.
which, yes, yeah, that this some kind of civilization down there, that they're detecting different kind of movements. So,
I love
yeah,
it.
every season produces new, very exciting findings. And another one from this year was they put a submersible deep underneath the Fitchner ice shelf, and they found hundreds of thousands of Jonah ice fish in their mating areas. So the ice fish are absolutely instrumental. They're the keystone species that provides food for all the seals and the penguins. And that they went and found their habitat was another big finding from this season.
I love it. I love it. And thank you for sharing your travels with us and your research. I know there's a lot more, and that's why people should come and see you at Contact in the Desert. If you don't see Brad there, you can go to bradolsen.com, and you can find out where he's going to be, because he speaks all over the place, and he's always standing room only. I mean, people love Brad because you've been doing this for a long time, and that, which means he doesn't just go off of old information. He's always researching new stuff too. So we appreciate that. But Brad, thank you for being on today, and you're going to have to come back. It's going to have to be sooner than, years.
You got my promise, we will, Tony. It's always great to talk to you. And I'll have copies of my new book at Contact in the Desert. So signing copies for people. And I love talking to people. I get a lot of information from just having conversations with people. And they'll say something like, oh, my father knew Admiral Byrd, and this is what he told him about Antarctica. So you get these little vignettes and tidbits from people too. And yeah, that's all part of the research process. You have to hear everybody out and see what they have to say. And if it checks out, then it's part of the narrative, right?
I have to say, I agree. I watched a thing where Elon Musk was being interviewed by some smart kid. I don't know who it was. And he was talking about the propulsion and, one of his ships. And the guy said, hey, did you check this? And you could see, and it says you could see Elon going, wait a minute, you're right. And so he ended up using that suggestion in one of his rockets. So you just never know what information you're going to get from somebody. So,
Yeah.
but, well, yes, you can go purchase Amazon, go to bradolsen.com, pick up the book. I mean, he's a great writer, great researcher. And Brad, thank you so much. And I'll see you next week.
Sounds good, Tony. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in on Truth Be Told on the Club Paranormal Network. You can subscribe, follow, share, and please leave an amazing comment and go to Apple and subscribe to our podcast. Until next time, take care of yourself and each other.